Good afternoon and welcome to the Great Lakes Seminar Series hosted by the Cooperative Institute for Great Lakes Research and the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory. My name is Mary Ogdahl and I am the Program Manager for SIGLR. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jonathan Edwards Opperman. Jonathan is a physical scientist at the U.S. National Ice Center, which is a multi-agency center composed of elements from the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and NOAA. Jonathan is with the NOAA component of the National Ice Center, which is housed in the National Weather Service. Jonathan holds degrees in Earth and Atmospheric Sciences and in Meteorology, with academic research focused on winter weather related to operational forecasting and polar meteorology. He joined the U.S. National Ice Center in 2018 as a snow and ice analyst, working on the interactive multi-sensor snow and ice mapping system. In 2020, he transitioned to a physical scientist role, serving as the center's lead ice analyst, covering the Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, and northeastern coast of the United States. Before I turn it over to our speaker, I would like to remind everyone to please leave their microphones muted for the duration of the webinar. You're welcome to enter questions into the chat box at any time during the presentation, which we will moderate at the end of the talk. And with that, I will turn it over to our speaker. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. It was a very kind introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Just want to say a quick thank you to everyone at SIGLR, at the university, and at GLURO for getting this together and allowing me to come speak to all of you. Hopefully the next time I get to speak to a group like this, it'll be in person. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the U.S. National Ice Center's operational Great Lakes mission, what our products are, what they are currently, who we serve, what data we use, and then how we're looking to evolve these in the future going forward. So sort of what our plans are for new products, for testing new data sources, things like that going into the future. So without further ado, I'm just going to start off by stepping back just a little bit. I want to give everyone here an overview of the U.S. National Ice Center. So not everyone might be familiar with it. So it's a very unique organization. It's a tri-agency organization composed of approximately 50 uniformed federal, civilian, and contract personnel from 3 different agencies. So from NOAA, from the U.S. Navy, and from the U.S. Coast Guard. So since we're focusing on the Great Lakes here, I'll just zoom in a little to the NOAA side of the house where I'm from. So our contribution to USNIC is via the Ice Services branch, which is a newly created branch under the Ocean Prediction Center, which is one of the 9 national centers for environmental prediction within the National Weather Service. So this was a relatively recent branch. Like I mentioned, we did transition from a different line office within NOAA, from NESDIS. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We've been part of the Weather Service for the past 2 years, and that's what's driving a lot of this talk towards evolving our services to integrate within the Weather Service. So for the next couple slides, I'll just give, again, some more overview of the USNIC as a whole before we get right into the Great Lakes stuff, just to sort of set the stage for it and let you know, again, what the USNIC as a whole is responsible for. So we have a global area of responsibility. So it makes us the foremost government provider of snow and ice information for U.S. government customers operating in and near ice-infested waters. So this can be icebreakers, research vessels. We also produce a variety of other snow and ice products from the strategic to tactical scales designed for a wide range of customers. That includes the general public, the military planners, intelligence agencies, the maritime community at large, the research community, as well as others. In order to accomplish our mission, we first produced a set of routine daily and weekly products that characterize the state of ice and snow around the world, and then we exploit this information to provide tailored tactical scale integrated support to our customers, especially those operating in and around sea and lake ice. So before we can analyze anything, we must collect all our data. We have to see the snow and ice at the surface. So our greatest resource is satellite imagery. It gets a wide area of coverage. We can see the entire globe. So we do use a variety of satellite products, domestic products, foreign, active, passive sensors, but we do rely heavily on synthetic aperture radar imagery, which I'll show you some examples of coming up. This is due to its ability to penetrate clouds, provide reliable high-resolution images day or night. Being an active sensor, it's not dependent on solar radiation. We also do rely on in-situ information. This can be from buoys, this can be from personnel that we have deployed from the office onto ships operating in icy conditions. We use a variety of surface observations, especially for our snow mapping mission. We also use weather radar. We then combine this with the latest technology, different satellite-derived products such as sea ice motion, as well as various forecast models. So we use a variety of models from the Navy, NOAA, from Environment and Climate Change Canada. They're our partners in a lot of the work we do. And this assists us in creating our analysis and any forecasts we create. So as I had mentioned before, we create a number of regularly scheduled products. Daily, we characterize the extent and concentration of sea ice globally and create a snow, no snow mask for the Northern Hemisphere. Weekly, we characterize ice stage of development, which is related to thickness of sea ice around the world. We then exploit this characterization to tailor products to certain customers, especially those operating within ice-infested waters. So that's icebreakers, from Coast Guard icebreakers. It can be research vessels as well. Other examples of products we tailor are information detailing fractures, leads, and plenty of openings in the ice for Navy submarines, information to assist in the deployment of limited Coast Guard assets over a wide geographic area. So the Coast Guard has icebreakers that deploy to the Arctic, to the Antarctic, to the Great Lakes, up and down the US East Coast, all the areas which can see ice. So as most of you or all of you know, NOAA is under the Department of Commerce. So there's a huge commercial aspect to the importance of the work that both Coast Guard and then the USNIC in conjunction with the Coast Guard do. So just to think about a couple locations within the United States where this is important. It's the Great Lakes, Chesapeake and Delaware Bays, as well as various hubs, ports across the northeastern US coast. So this image over the Great Lakes here is from near record ice coverage. So right at this point, it was approximately 88%. The lakes were approximately 88% covered. And this was in 2014. And during this year, with the limited icebreaking resources of the US and Canada, which was about 10 vessels total, shipping during sort of the height of the winter came to a standstill. This cost the economy more than $700 million and 4,000 jobs. The total amount of freight carried during these early parts of 2014 was 7 million tons less compared to the year prior, which caused coal shortages at power plants, and many steel makers had to stop production for a period of time. So there's a huge commercial need to keep shipping moving even during the winter. And Coast Guard facilitates that, and we provide that environmental information to Coast Guard to allow them to do this safely. Over on the right here, we have another one of our regions. It's the Chesapeake Bay. So there's a huge, again, economic importance to this area. So there's a lot of economic value. There's a huge seafood industry and just a lot of jobs and economic development through recreation and commercial shipping throughout this area. And a lot of the ships in this area, not all, but a lot of them are not ice capable. So having ice forecasts and ice analysis during the winter is key for safe operation for any of these vessels during the winter. So our biggest customer at the Ice Center, especially when it comes to our continental US ice products, is the US Coast Guard. So ice has a huge impact to their operations and to where they place their assets. So our products assist in the management of these limited ice-breaking assets over large geographic areas. So we help these products, this environmental information helps the Coast Guard decision makers strategically place different vessels at choke points between the lakes, areas where there's high ice concentration, and also in important shipping routes. So those connecting waterways between the lakes, like the St. Mary's River, the Detroit and St. Clair rivers, the Straits between Lakes Michigan and Huron. All of these are really important areas. So every year there are two major operations over the Great Lakes. Operation Taconite, right out of Sector Sault Ste. Marie, which is the northern icebreaking mission, Superior, Michigan, Northern Huron, the St. Mary's River, connecting Superior and Northern Huron, et cetera, those areas. And then Operation Coal Shovel, which is run out of Sector Detroit, which is the southern icebreaking mission, Southern Huron, Erie, Ontario. So Coast Guard operations during the year, and especially during the winter, consist of a variety of different potential flavors. So there's search and rescue, homeland security, vessel response, community support. So this could be like braking for flood control or to assist icebound communities in immediate need of food or fuel. Facilitation of navigation is the big thing you'll hear about a lot, which is just another word for icebreaking. So we can see here on the left a convoy of Lakers, so carrying various goods through a channel that's been somewhat cut up by the icebreaker. So the ice sort of within that channel, it's still there, but it's all broken up into pieces of little brash ice pieces, which allows the Lakers to transit through. So just to give you an idea of some of the importance of how big a mission this is during the winter, some stats from 21-22, so the previous winter, 2021, the previous winter. So Operation Taconite during that winter had 95 days of icebreaking services, over 2,000 hours, over 100 commercial vessel transits. The southern mission, Coal Shovel, was 40 days of icebreaking, over 500 hours of icebreaking, and over 50 commercial vessel transits, with the Canadian Coast Guard providing 94 days of service, well over 1,500 hours, well over 1,000 vessel transits. And this combined was over 3,000 icebreaking hours. So for that previous winter, not this winter, but the previous one. Just to give you an idea of how much this can vary as well. So during a really severe season like 2013, 2014, the number of icebreaking hours went up to over 13,000. And then during a much less severe winter, so like 2019, 2020, it was under 3,000 hours. So during a severe winter, this can be quite an incredible task that's put to these, approximately 10 ships that are between the US and Canadian Coast Guard. So now as we move into away from sort of the background and into what we do at the US National Ice Center, I want to talk about the most important partnership that we have at the Ice Center in regards to the Great Lakes. So that's the North American Ice Service. There are 3 core members. So the US National Ice Center, then there's the Canadian Ice Service. It's an operational unit, part of Environment and Climate Change Canada, with the mandate to monitor and provide information and services about ice and icebergs in Canada's oceans and waterways in support of marine safety, weather, and climate prediction. The other core partner is the International Ice Patrol. That's an operational unit of the US Coast Guard, formed in the wake of the sinking of the RMS Titanic. Except for periods of World War, the Ice Patrol has been monitoring iceberg danger on and near the Grand Banks of Newfoundland and broadcasting the iceberg limit to mariners. The core purposes of IIP is to promote the safe navigation of the Northwest Atlantic Ocean when the danger of iceberg collision exists. So I've circled the USNIC and the Canadian Ice Service, or CIS. So these are the core groups for the Great Lakes. As you know, we share a border across the Great Lakes, so each nation has a lot of interests in that area. There are some participant and observer members, so they're not core members, but they have joined NACE in a slightly smaller role. So that's the Alaska Sea Ice Program and the Danish Meteorological Institute. So in 2016, the Danish Meteorological Institute joined NACE as an observer to support mutual interests in surveying clients in the Northwest Atlantic and the waters around Greenland. So they have a lot of partnerships with the International Ice Patrol, given just their location of interest. So the NACE partnership is enhanced by this relationship with information sharing and chart production related to sea ice and icebergs in and around Greenlandic waters. In 2018, NOAA's National Weather Service Alaska region joined NACE as a participant in order to establish formal collaboration activities in and around the Alaskan waters. So NACE coordination with the NWS Alaska region sea ice program will improve ice charting in the Western North American Arctic. So we're starting to expand these partnerships in the North American Ice Service. That's just a little background of it, but I'll obviously focus more on the USNIC and Canadian Ice Service from here on out. because that's important for the Great Lakes. So like I said, we share responsibility for charting ice conditions, and the way we do this is during a standard week, USNIC is responsible for completing a full analysis of ice conditions. So that's concentration, that's ice stage of development, which is related to ice thickness and age, areas of shore fast ice, whether there's brash ice, what the flow size is, all of the characteristics of ice that we can analyze. We do that 3 days a week, and the Canadian Ice Service does that 4 days a week. And we switch this responsibility back and forth. So on any given day, one center has that operational responsibility, has until the end of the day to complete the analysis and send it to the other center. So this is really helpful because it does allow each center to situationally back up the other if there was ever, some sort of IT issue or any reason why it would be very difficult or impossible for one center to complete the analysis. We can use the other as a backup, which has happened on occasion. We have tested this out. It does work. So it's great from a continuity of operations perspective. This agreement also allows each center to leverage the strengths of the other, different experience levels. So if you're losing someone in one center, you're not losing, all of that knowledge and experience from the group as a whole. Maybe the other center has, can sort of step in and help teach the newer people at the other center that's just lost a staff member. So it's a fantastic partnership that makes each group stronger. This also allows data sharing. So a few examples of this. So we've gotten increased access to synthetic aperture radar data through this agreement. So in the past, this was from a satellite platform called RadarSat-2. Data was shared through the NACE agreement between the two centers. Currently, this is RadarSat Constellation mission. It's a newer satellite platform, but again, we're getting that data shared under the NACE agreement. Also, beginning the last ice season, model data from the Canadian Water Cycle Prediction System was made public, and that was sort of facilitated and set up through this partnership because making that data public and allowing us to have access to it, among other groups, would improve not only our products at the U.S. National Ice Center, but it would improve the Canadian Ice Service's products as well because they're one and the same for the Great Lakes. So this also allows us to have regular communication on current and forecast ice conditions, analysis procedures, new technology, joint operational support, data sharing, and again, like I said before, reliable backup support. So just having this type of partnership, it's very unique. It's the only one I know of in government, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic operational partnership. So I'm going to start going through our standard products now under NACE. So first we have the daily NavText, it's navigational telex. It's a text forecast / nowcast of predominant ice conditions. It's issued at noon daily throughout the ice season, and it's just valid until the next one is issued. So it's relatively simple. Canadian Coast Guard does broadcast this out via audio, so it's kept to just a few sentences for each geographic region within the Great Lakes. We produce the Lake Michigan portion, the CIS produces the rest, so we do this, each center works on this every day, and then this gets issued out in English and in French each day. So in terms of longer range outlooks, we have 15 and 30-day outlooks. So these are issued at the beginning and middle of each month, as well as a seasonal outlook right at the beginning of December. So these are a little more general than the ice charts, which I'll show you in a minute. This is giving us sort of a medium long range outlook of what ice conditions will be throughout the season. So these are essentially in like the 2 to 4 week sort of time frame, that sub-seasonal time frame. And these are put out throughout the ice season until the final outlook, which will be completely ice-free, so until there is no more ice. And they start right at the beginning of December with that seasonal outlook. So this is our core product. It's the analysis of current ice conditions, valid around 18Z each day, gets put out in the afternoon. This is a chart based off of that analysis, which we do in GIS software. So the colors here represent concentration. The gray is shore fastened ice, so ice that's attached to the shore. You'll hear me refer to this as shore fast ice. That's just the shorthand for it. So if you're not familiar with the lingo, there you go. And then the colors here, generally, warmer colors, higher concentration of mobile ice. The cooler colors, lower concentrations. So you can see it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of detail here. A lot of this is due to just how good of data access we have now, which I'll go into in a minute. So we have a lot of satellite data. We can see a lot of information about the ice. So within these you can see my cursor here. Within these eggs, we call them, there's a lot of different information. I won't bore you with the details, but basically we have total concentration. We have information on the stage of development, which is related to the age and thickness of the ice, as well as information on what we call ice form, which is, whether the ice is shore fastened, whether it's brash ice, what the flow size is, things like that. So now that I've sort of shown you what the product looks like, I guess the next big question is, well, how do we actually get this information? So it's a human-derived analysis every day, and we use a variety of different data sources. I'll sort of start with our primary data sources and then just cycle through all of the other data we use. So our primary data source is synthetic aperture radar. So this is our preferred data source for analyzing ice anywhere. The Great Lakes is no exception. It's, the same in the Arctic and the Antarctic. And over the Great Lakes, we have several different platforms we can use. Our primary sources are the RadarSat Constellation mission, which is a series of 3 satellites, and Sentinel-1, which is an open source data set from the European Space Agency. And if you remember from before, that RadarSat Constellation mission data is what we get from the Canadian Ice Service through the North American Ice Service Agreement. So this is high resolution. We can use it to distinguish between different ice stages of development or ice types. So we're looking sort of in this area, you have this kind of formless area of ice along the shore here. This is new ice. It can show up initially very, very dark, like these blacker colors in here. And then it slowly starts to brighten, but there's no real discrete form to the ice. You can't see individual ice flows like individual pieces of ice. So these bright little streaks through it where you can pick out ice flows, that's older, thicker ice that's been blown off of the shore. So what's happening here is a front has passed. This is relatively late in the season, 28th of March. So we've had northwesterly winds. The temperatures dropped a lot. That's why we're having all of a sudden this new ice forming, even though we're into the melt season, into spring. And then some of the mobile thicker ice is blowing off the shore. So you have the winds sort of coming down here, bringing that cold air, allowing new ice to form, but also moving around that older ice. These really bright returns right along the island here, what's happening is that mobile ice is getting pushed and smashed into the coast of the island here. So when you have that brash ice that's been smashed up a lot, it shows up bright. And then since we have northwesterly winds and it's moving all of the mobile ice, you can see very clearly the shore fast ice edge along here within the bays in Northern Superior. So there's a lot of information we can get from this type of satellite data. I'll show you one more example of RCM data real quick. So here, this is zoomed right in the lower St. Mary's River. So Lake Huron proper is down here. This is the St. Mary's. This is the North Channel, if you're familiar with the geography. But again, there's a lot of information within this synthetic aperture radar data. So this area here, where it starts off is kind of a darker return, then brighter, darker again, and brighter. This is the ship track that's being cut by US and Canadian icebreakers. So that bright return is the brash ice, and then these darker areas in here, sort of where the one is, and then up here and here again, are areas where the brash ice is already flushed out of the channel, and you have just open water within that channel that's been cut. So you can see some of the brash ice here is moving downriver, and then you can see along the shore here is where the shore fast ice is. In here, these little dark spots are little melt holes. So we often refer to this as rotten ice. So we're in melt season. You can see the ice is starting to decay, getting ready to break up. And then sort of outside of the main channel that's been cut by the icebreakers, you can see the just discrete ice flows that have been flushed out of that channel and are moving into the Lake Huron proper and are melting currently. So tons of information we can get out of this, and we get excellent coverage from synthetic aperture radar over the Great Lakes in particular. So that's how we can provide a lot of detail within those charts, is because of how good this data is. So we also use visible and infrared data. So this could be from MOES or VIIRS if we're using a polar orbiter, or from GOES. So there's several benefits to having this. It is lower resolution than the synthetic aperture radar data, but it has some other benefits. So it's very easy for an analyst who's been trained to distinguish the shore fast ice edge. So right here, we have a lot of mobile ice in Green Bay, and you can kind of see, it's a little hard because we're zoomed out, but there's a bright line right along here that indicates that that ice is shore fastened. When you have mobile ice moving against that fast ice edge, it can be a little hard using synthetic aperture radar, even though the resolution is very high, just to pick out exactly where that edge is, but it can be easier with visible imagery. A bigger benefit, especially with GOES data or any geostationary imagery, is you can determine ice movement. So we can get an idea of how fast ice conditions are changing. You know, is the ice flushing out of Green Bay here? Is it getting compacted against the shore in the north? And even when you have partly cloudy conditions, if you have that looping imagery, you can distinguish ice from clouds. So it's having that geostationary imagery is very good. And ideally, we'd like to combine, always, you know, be able to have some visible and infrared imagery along with synthetic aperture radar imagery, just to utilize the strengths of both in the analysis. But as you know, from most of you know, I'm sure from looking at satellite data, that's not always the case. You're not always going to have cloud-free conditions for your visible imagery. So we also utilize model data. So what I have here is an example. So we have RCM synthetic aperture radar data on the left, and then on the right, model data valid 24 hours later. So the idea here is to show you that, you know, the model is indicating what we might be able to surmise from, you know, weather models or from just general conditions, that after you had a wind shift behind the front, the remaining ice in Green Bay there in the image, once that wind shifts to the northwest, that ice is just going to compact against the shore here. So this is a pretty simple example, but just an easy one to understand. But we've started to integrate this model data, you know, into our operational workflow, so it can be useful when we have gaps in our imagery, for example. You know, if we don't have an image over an area, we can take a look at how the model is performing against observations in an area where we do have satellite imagery, and then sort of make a judgment call utilizing, you know, weather observations, any ship reports we might have, as well as this model data in areas where we don't have imagery. So it's something we're working to integrate more into our operations as time goes on. But this is relatively new for us to have access to, so just the past couple of seasons for this particular model data. So other observations, in situ observations. So there are ice recon flights from Coast Guard, so that can provide us images over a variety of areas. This can help out in the connecting waterways between the Great Lakes, where they're very, very narrow. So even with high resolution imagery, it can be a little hard to tell what's going on sometimes, but, you know, a picture is fantastic. And they'll also, you know, provide a little text report sometimes with it. There are also analysts from the Montreal Ice Office, which will embed on ships sometimes, so they will send us little notes about the ice. So here's an example from this season where they noted that ridging was starting to happen and the ice was a bit thicker than maybe was expected. So having these in situ observations to sort of validate what we're doing is really important as well, even though they're only at certain point locations. So we don't have a lot of them, but they are useful to integrate into our operations. So now we take all of that data, so the imagery, any other data, be it model data, observations, we put that all into our GIS software, and then we generate a whole bunch of standard products. So there's a lot of different products. There can be GIS formatted products like shapefiles, KMZs. The KMZs are very useful for Coast Guard for, you know, that sort of district level planning, just for situational awareness. They can pull that into their system along with other data sources, and, you know, from shore, be able to just get a good idea of situational awareness of where conditions are going to be the worst, where they need to move assets. We also produce some text products, so variety of uses for these. Some of these are just they've been produced the same way for many years, so it can be useful from a climate monitoring perspective. They're just consistent, and they'll keep getting produced. Some are used as inputs for numerical weather prediction. I'll get into that a little bit more later. And then we have all of our standard charts. Here's just a couple examples over here. So that's our standard product suite. One thing I want to talk about a lot here, and one thing we're trying to evolve as well as continue what we've already been doing, is our tailored products for certain core customers. So our biggest customer for the US government, obviously in the Great Lakes, the Coast Guard. So we've produced certain charts just to certain specifications that they like, to include maximum thickness, potential thickness, as well as ice concentration information on the same chart, information on total ice coverage. We have similar charts like this that will allow them to compare to the previous season, just to give their operators, something to compare to what they know. So if they operated in the previous season, they can get an idea of what it looks like now versus then, go back and forth, just to put it within their frame of reference. So these are all charts that don't contain any. It's not additional information from the analysis. It's just tailored pieces of it that are most impactful for their planning and for their briefings, especially at sort of the headquarters level at Coast Guard. So this is one area where we really want to start evolving our products and services, is that tailored support to core government partners, which is a big part of USNIC's mission. It's a big part of the Weather Service's mission as well. So there's a few different questions here about how we can evolve into the future. So how do we utilize new imagery sources? So, as technology advances, we're getting higher resolution imagery. There's more advances every year, it seems like. There's increased availability of synthetic aperture radar as well. And then the big question really is, how can we provide more operationally useful products? So this could be improved support to the numerical weather prediction community as they develop their models and they need to integrate ice information into those models. It could be products for people operating on the Great Lakes that are zoomed into areas of interest. So the most important areas for ice breaking are those connecting waterways between each of the Great Lakes. So if we have products zoomed into that then illustrate the most important ice characteristics to the mariner, to that icebreaker. So is that, fast ice location, ice drift, areas where ice is compacted against the shore, for example. So that can create significant amounts of pressure within the ice if you have that wind stress pushing the ice against the shore or against the fast ice boundary. So that can be a big hazard. Another question that's open right now is, what about forecast products? So not just like the longer range outlooks for sort of situational awareness like we produce now, but what about like 24, 48, 72 hours, something along those timescales, something that might be operationally impactful. So these are a lot of these are open questions. Some of these we're already doing, but this is really where we're moving forward over the next few years. And this is a pretty good summary of what we're investigating in terms of evolving our product suite going forward and the way we serve our core customers. So we'll start off with an easy one. This is one that wasn't overly difficult to implement. So increased SAR coverage, we've been getting more and more of it. So winter 2020. So this winter and most of last winter, we've completely replaced out RadarSat 2 with the RadarSat Constellation mission. So that's 3 times as many satellites. RadarSat 2 was a single satellite, and the RadarSat Constellation mission was 3 satellites. So that's the primary SAR platform used by the Canadian Ice Service. And just to note, we can still get RadarSat 2 data through USNIC commercially ordered for special circumstances, if we really need imagery over a location or for tailored support of a particular vessel. And like I was noting before, we do have this data, the RCM data shared by CIS through the North American Ice Service Agreement. So that image, I know it's a bit zoomed out, you can't really see the ice, but it gives you an idea of what 1 day's worth of coverage of just RadarSat Constellation mission data is over the Great Lakes. So we're generally getting something like 2/3 of the lakes covered, certain locations covered twice, about 12 hours apart. So it's definitely increased our confidence in the analysis. There's less areas where we have to sort of fill in with our forecasting knowledge from previous days. We actually have eyes on the ice relatively close to the valid time of the charts now, at a good resolution over most of the lakes. So it's really been kind of a game changer, really, for the way we do the analysis and for the amount of confidence we can put into it. So another area that we're working on now is just getting more sources of high resolution visible imagery. So not your standard, GOES, MODIS, VIIRS, but things like Sentinel-2 here. So the resolution is quite high. We could get more detailed information in high impact regions. So this could maybe be ports. It could be those connecting waterways between the Great Lakes. Could allow for better support of certain field projects that go on over the Great Lakes during the winter. So there's a lot of potential here. We're still working on what the best way is to integrate data like this into our operations and our support of various groups. So here's another example. So this is a satellite called Worldview. Up on the top left there, you can see part of Lake Superior, and that's just a zoomed out version of this image. And then I've just zoomed in on sort of the tip of the island there where we had the imagery. So I picked here because there was, and I'll talk about this a bit more later, but there was a field project through the National Park Service over this winter. And we trialed out a day of this imagery just to see maybe what we could do with it from the analyst perspective. So it could be something we provide directly to them with maybe annotations on it about where there's shore fast ice, where there's maybe cracking in the ice. There's a lot of potential here. This is something that the first time we saw it over the Great Lakes, at USNIC at least, was this past winter. So it's a new data source, again, that we're trying to find the best way to integrate into our tailored support program. So it's not something we would get every day, but it's something that when there is a particular field project or a particular area that's proving difficult for Coast Guard operations, we could see if we could get this imagery and then how we could get it and get all of the detail and information within it to the customer. So these are sort of open questions that we're investigating currently. So you hear me before saying tailored support a lot. I wanted to throw this slide up here in case, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Weather Service Initiative Impact-Based Decision Support Services. I won't read this off to you, but basically it's, what I want to highlight here is I use these two terms interchangeably. So the USNIC's Tailored Support Program or the Weather Services Impact-Based Decision Support Services, they're one and the same. They were just the same goal to, support that high value decision making, either in response to a particular hazard or event or for a particular customer, operating in an area that's needs that additional high level detailed support. These are very similar initiatives. So the USNIC's mission goes really hand in hand with this Weather Service mission, and they're definitely a big part of both groups. So this is how we've been sort of evolving our IDSS or tailored support for customers over this past season. So here's an example of a zoom in of Whitefish Bay, which is in eastern Lake Superior. So right down here is the St. Mary's River. Here's Whitefish Bay as a whole. So within the river here in Sault Ste. Marie, there's locks that open in the spring, and then shipping starts, and that really ramps up Coast Guard's mission because they need to keep shipping channels open throughout here. So what you have here is shore fastened ice outlined in yellow. So that was analyzed by one of our analysts. And then this ice here is mobile, free floating around. So we got a report from the Coast Guard that this area was being particularly difficult to navigate because ice conditions were changing very rapidly. And it was very difficult to keep a safe track for the transits through the bay out into Lake Superior, and then from Lake Superior back into the bay into the St. Mary's River. So it was a very operationally difficult time. So what we did here was try out a bit of a new product to get a small area analyzed first thing in the morning instead of waiting for our full analysis, which doesn't come out until the end of the day. Getting this to the Coast Guard as soon as possible, along with a text forecast discussion of how we think the ice is going to shift. Another piece of information we put on here are these track lines. So the Lake Carriers Association has preferred tracks for up and downbound throughout the lakes. So this is just, again, for awareness, this is where those preferred tracks are that Coast Guard is looking to try and maintain and try and keep vessels along. And then they can look at that, they can look at the ice conditions, they can look at our forecast discussion that we'd sent them, our brief forecast discussion, and then hopefully that aids them in their decision making earlier in the morning so that they can figure out the best way to transit ships up and downbound across the lakes and facilitate that flow of commerce. So a key part of this is just having open lines of communication with these core customers during the ice season. So it's important to know how our current products and services are being used, because that tells us what important features there and what information they're getting out of it, and then can better assist us as we improve. So one of the things we were told early was that, an analyst had let the CEO of a particular icebreaker know about a fracture in some of the shore fast ice, which is where they were where that particular ship was ending up at night. The idea being that fast ice area was stable, they could get some rest at the end of the day. But giving them information about where there's fractures starting to appear in that shore fast ice can allow them to plan better and have this direct mission impact. And then this open line of communication allows the customer, that core customer, to come back to us with other requests, so that those track lines that were added weren't on the original products that were sent out for the first couple of days, first thing in the morning. That was an additional ask a little while later, when something we were able to facilitate with a quick turnaround time to improve the product and then improve our support of the Coast Guard icebreakers operating in these hazardous conditions and trying to keep the commercial vessels safe and keep those transits moving up and downbound. So we need to continue refining services. So this is going to be ongoing. It's not just open lines of communication during the ice season, it's also open lines of communication after the season is over, is sort of a retrospective to figure out what worked, what didn't, what else could be needed. So there's different things we could integrate into our products we're sending out. So do we integrate other products from National Weather Service offices to integrate that marine information in general? So I put an example here of a gale warning that was in effect over Whitefish Bay, which we did send along to Coast Guard in addition to our ice forecast discussion. We could potentially do a more robust job about pointing out any fractures or melt holes as that ice starts to rot out, that shore fast ice starts to rot out. Maybe that would be more helpful to see where the most fractures are noted by an analyst. The ice forecast discussions, again, is it important to get this product out early and keep that discussion short? Would they rather have it be a little more in depth, go out longer in time, shorter in time? So it's something we'll continue to evolve, continue to refine with those open lines of communication with our core customers. So here's another example from this past season of a new IDSS support service that we put out over Lake Superior. So this was for the National Park Service. So we combined and worked with two other Weather Service WFOs, so weather forecast offices, and they would set up forecast information, some marine information, some aviation forecasting. We would send in some ice analysis and maybe discussion. And then one of the WFOs in particular would put this all together in an integrated ice marine weather report and send it out to the Park Service. So they were flying planes over this island. They were also landing supplies on some of the shore fast ice. So having all of this information together, so that aviation information for the planes, the ice information, so they know how long areas had been shore fast and had been stable. Having all of this information together was a new way of supporting a customer that at least we hadn't done before. So it was that first major collaboration between the weather forecast office and us at the National Center to get that sort of combined marine and ice and weather report out to a customer that's dealing with hazards related to all of those aspects of our science. So another area that we could look into is we've referred to as hazard-based products. So this is something that's been worked in another international collaboration group, the International Ice Charting Working Group. So it's another group that USNIC and the Canadian Ice Service and many other nations are part of, just to discuss among all of the different government agencies that deal with ice. So this is an example from the Canadian Ice Service. So ice pressure is caused when winds, and mostly winds, but winds and currents compact ice against the shore fast ice edge. It's a major hazard to vessels. So you can see here is they're indicating where there's going to be that strong ice pressure and what the drift is towards the shore or towards the fast ice edge. So one potential, if this is deemed something that operators in the Great Lakes would like to see as well, this could be expanded from, these Northern Canadian waters to the Great Lakes jointly as a NACE product. So that's another thing we're exploring in very, very early stages, just to see if that's another way we can better support the mariner. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but we did transition to the National Weather Service approximately 2 years ago. So we moved from NSDIS to the Weather Service. This puts us in a better position to move towards forecast products and to integrate ice and other marine weather information. So this is another way we're sort of thinking in the future, okay, how do we better align with the Weather Service by moving into this forecast realm? So one of the reasons this is a good time to start having this discussion is we're starting to get access to more tools. So our analysts now have access to the water cycle prediction systems that's provided by Environment and Climate Change Canada. It's approximately 1 kilometer resolution coupled atmosphere ocean ice model. And this particular version being available in March 2022, we had an older version, a bit lower resolution, available about a year before, a little more than a year and a half before that. Also, the next version of the Great Lakes forecast system will have addition of an ice model. So I know a lot of you on here that I've talked with all the time have been working on that. So we'll now have, in the relatively near future, 2 operational systems, hopefully that will give us forecast data, and it'll give us more tools. So if we can leverage these new tools to improve current products, so to gap fill where we don't have imagery, sure, but also to create sort of the next level of product that, shorter term forecast that could be useful for, a mariner's planning. So the reason this is so important is conditions on the Great Lakes can change very, very rapidly. So here I have 3 shots of synthetic aperture radar imagery over Duluth and the Apostle Islands, sort of that end of Lake Superior right here. So you can see sort of at the end of the day on the 25th of this year, we had, Duluth was iced in, quite a bit of ice along the shore. If we go forward 24 hours, you can see that that ice has started to break off after a wind shift. So the winds are now, coming from that southwesterly direction. So it's pushed that ice off. And then another 12 hours later, the ice is essentially gone. So it's off your screen here, pushing up further north in Lake Superior. So it's very rapidly changing. And, the analysis of a satellite image alone isn't going to communicate that potential for rapidly changing conditions, which is very important for everything from, models that utilize ice information to, the mariner who's trying to plan what conditions are going to be like for their transits. So we can also sort of in a similar vein evolve how we interact with the numerical weather prediction community. So we're currently, our analysis is used in NOAA's WaveWatch 3 model. Highest concentrations mask out waves is the general, very high level description of how it's used. So there's potential for us to provide improved ice information, some more information on other ice characteristics like stage of development, not just concentrations. There's also the fact that we're going to start using more data operationally. We'll have more available tools to produce forecast products in the future, but we can also sort of help in reverse. It's not just about these models helping us move into the future, but we can also, our analysis can be used to help validate model guidance especially if we interact a lot with the modelers themselves and keep, again, good open lines of communication. There's also the potential for certain models maybe to have, that some of our data assimilated into their initial conditions. So it's exciting times ahead, I think. There's a lot of potential for the next 5 years and how we can improve with our internal customers within NOAA, within the modeling communities, as well as our external customers like the mariner out on the lakes themselves. So I'll leave this to any questions. I also put my email address here if you have anything you want to send me. Always open to hearing from people, and as well as our general distribution for all of our analysts at the U.S. National Ice Center. So with that, I'll turn it back over to everyone else.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that very interesting presentation. And I welcome anyone who has a question to type it in the question box. You can, alternatively, you can just raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask your question. We have a question from Ayumi Fujisaki Minome. Ayumi says, great presentation. Other than the Great Lakes, are you aware of any other large lakes over the world where ice analysis products like Great Lakes, like in the Great Lakes, are generated by organizations like the National Ice Center?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I wouldn't know the names of the lakes offhand, but I think there were a few of the larger lakes that have some seasonal products, some of the lakes in Canada that the Canadian Ice Service would analyze. It wouldn't be quite as important's not the right word. I think they're fairly seasonal, so just like a freeze up analysis or sort of an on request, because some of those northern lakes in Canada ice over, completely. So it's just kind of the freeze up, melt out sort of analysis. It's the only ones I can think of off the top of my head.
Thank you. And we have another question from Tracy Gerard, who asks, can we get links or access to all of the resources that were presented on?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just want to shoot me an email, it's up there on the screen. I'd be happy to provide links to any of the products we produce, as well as any information on that tailored support we can provide to Coast Guard. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, not seeing any pop up. If anyone has something they're trying to type in quickly, just go ahead and hit the raise your hand so I know that you have a question. Otherwise, we will thank our presenter, Jonathan, for speaking with us today, and thank you everybody for attending. I encourage you to check out the SIGLR website to see the list of upcoming seminars and join us in the future. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks again, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.